The young woman came to the tomb and looked around. There was no one in the cemetery. She fell down and cried because she was tired of everything. The woman was mentally and physically exhausted. The grave was at the end of the cemetery. Luckily, Rachel was there, and she didn't have to worry if someone saw her. This was her husband's tomb. Unfortunately, Rachel didn't come here very often. There was always something stopping her from going. After the accident that took the life of Max, her husband, she too had been seriously injured, but survived. It wasn't clear why, after all, it took her so much effort, time and money to get on her feet and not be a burden to anyone. Now she was fine, but unfortunately her husband was no longer with her. Rachel cried and started messing with the grave. She wanted to clean it and put some flowers. The monument had to be repainted because the paint was peeling. A year ago, Rachel was upset and so depressed that she couldn't leave the house to visit him. And so, the following year, the monument did not look good at all. Rachel put up a cheap monument. It was metal, because she didn't have enough money for a marble one at the time. And even for this, she had to borrow money. Now the woman's situation is better. Rachel has paid her debts, and she lives modestly. She wanted to erect a new monument, and had been saving money for some time, as one day she wanted to put up a good one as her late husband deserved it. But in the meantime, she would fix it up a bit. The woman began to clean the rust off the monument with a metal brush and thought about the misfortune of being there on such a hot day. Work was moving slowly and Rachel crouched down to catch her breath, hiding in the shadow of the monument. In a moment she put her hand on the floor and her hand sank. Rachel just now noticed that there was a hole next to the monument, as if it were an underpass. It looked like there was nothing to pay attention to because it was probably wild animals that were digging. Maybe it was a mole or some other animal. But Rachel was burning with curiosity. She forgot for a moment that she had gone to visit her husband to wallow in sadness once more, but she began to wonder what kind of animal was there. At first she just looked into the hole to see if anything would come out, then she started digging and saw that the hole was small and led straight under the iron tombstone. She was worried. If the animal got to the coffin and made a nest there, then for some reason she had an unpleasant feeling because she didn't want anything to live in her husband's coffin. She tried to get to the truth with her own strength, but the hole was deep. Rachel decided to dig the grave and see what was there. For this reason, the woman asked the cemetery guard for a shovel. The man was very surprised when the woman made such a request, and then he thought, "Who is this woman? What's she going to do with a shovel in the cemetery in this heat? Even gravediggers prefer to dig at night. What if she gets heat stroke and then I have to deal with it?" thought the guard. He wanted to dissuade her, but the woman was persistent, so he had to go with her. They started to dig, but the hole was deep, until the man noticed that something was wrong. "And where is the coffin?" He was intrigued and dug left and right, but there was no sign of any coffin. The widow didn't believe it. The woman then forced the guard to dig deeper. After all, anything could have happened. For example, the ground could have settled or the depth could have been greater than in other graves. But after another request from the woman to dig a little more, he put down the shovel and said that there was nothing in the grave, no animals, no coffin. The guard took the shovel and said, "How was the funeral?" And after that, the man left and Rachel stood there confused and thoughtful. When the man left, the woman ran to the hole again and started digging with her hands. But after a few minutes she saw that she really had nothing. To her surprise, she realized that the tomb was actually empty. "But what about my husband?" she wondered. Rachel sat on the floor again, but she wasn't crying anymore. She tried to remember that day. It had been more than 2 years since then. She and Max were walking home. The mood was good, and they were laughing. After that, she no longer remembers exactly what they had talked about. She just remembers that they had a feeling of lightness. They were happy together, and in fact they never had any problems. It was like they were made for each other because they never fought, and everyone was jealous of them. They were driving the car and Rachel was behind the wheel. She had just taken out her wallet from her, but it was not her fault the accident happened. It happened in a matter of seconds. Suddenly a truck appeared in front of their car and there was nothing she could do. For a moment she saw the truck pull into the same lane. After that there was a flash of light and complete silence. She didn't attend the funeral because she was in a coma. The woman was unconscious for a month and then she woke up. It seemed to him that only a moment had passed. She only remembered the glare from the truck's headlights and how she jerked in the car. It was scary. She didn't want to open her eyes, but then she heard voices and felt someone holding her hand. "Sure, lie down," a woman's voice reassured her. Rachel opened her eyes. She was in a hospital room and a nurse was trying to put her to bed. And 4 was stuck in her arm, so her second life started from there. Her friend tried to pull Rachel out of her depression because when she found out Max was gone she didn't want to live anymore. But there was nothing she could do because she was here and he was there. "Are you going to starve?" her friend said, irritated. "You are killing yourself." Rachel was lying uncomfortable, mourning her husband. Max would hardly want her to lie down like a vegetable forever. Then the woman realized that she had become a burden to everyone because her pain would not end. She felt like a roller rolled over her every night. Soon, when the pills stopped working, her whole body started to ache and she stayed in the hospital until she realized that something had to be done. She decided she couldn't go, although the doctors assured her that there was nothing wrong with her legs. The woman hadn't suffered in bed for a long time, so the doctors didn't stand on ceremony with her and quickly explained what her options were. "You can't stay lying down, otherwise your whole body will atrophy," the doctors said. She didn't have much of a choice and yet she had to overcome herself. It was clear that she had to rehabilitate herself, but it wasn't cheap. She could barely pay the bills. At first she couldn't go to her husband's grave because of her physical condition, and then she got bogged down in work because she had debts to pay off and somehow live on. But now she was baffled by her husband's grave. How can this happen? What was wrong? She put all the pieces together in her head for a long time, but nothing came to her mind. She was told that her husband was buried by his friends, but she didn't know who was at the funeral. The woman tried not to talk about it because it was hard for her to hear the details for a long time. Rachel tried to figure something out and called her friends. "Hey, were you at the funeral?" And then, friends said that they just came for the wake, that some distant relatives had arranged everything. Max's parents had already passed away and Rachel's parents were just invited to the wake as well. It was strange how things turned out. No one suspected anything at the time, and she never would have thought that there might be something wrong. But now she realized that no one had ever seen her dead husband. They didn't even know if there was a coffin really. A private detective helped the woman solve the mystery. She had decided to spend the money she was saving for a new monument on detective services. If her husband were alive, he wouldn't need a monument, and now Rachel was sure of it. Max was alive. The detective quickly provided the client with the address where her husband was. He really was alive and living with a woman. Rachel's unpleasant fears were confirmed. Her husband decided to leave her, taking advantage of such an accident. She thought there was love between them. It wasn't hard to guess her husband decided he didn't need a disabled wife. It was sad to realize that. Rachel wanted to look him in the eye and ask him why he did what he did. She was afraid to hear the truth, but she wanted to close the matter so she wouldn't worry anymore and not be tortured by speculations. She went to the address given, and the door opened. It was Max. The woman found she wasn't prepared for this but looked at him silently, not knowing what to say. "Good morning, is there anything I can help you with?" the husband asked. Rachel looked at his unflappable face in confusion. She expected to see wonder or fear or remorse on his face. But there was no emotion, except a slight amazement at the fact that some woman rang the doorbell and was silent in front of him. "You must have the wrong address," the man said. "Okay, It was obvious, Max didn't recognize her. He couldn't just pretend he didn't know her, she could always tell by his eyes when he was lying. Rachel didn't want to talk to him anymore, so she decided to let him live his life. She turned and wanted to leave, but Max called after her. "I know you from somewhere." She looked at him confused. Max had a very different expression on his face now. He was looking at her as before. Her heart clenched, and she realized that she had lost her memory. "Rachel, is you?" Max mumbled something uncertain and a tear ran down her face. She couldn't help it, and then she threw herself on his neck and started to cry. Rachel went there to look the traitor in the eyes, but at that moment everything changed. A woman came to them, and when she saw Rachel she was shocked. She was Max's woman. A woman he thought was his wife, but it turns out he was living with an imposter. Anna had no choice but to invite Rachel into the house and tell her the whole truth. Anna was in love with Max, she was a client of the company where he worked. Anna gave him signs of attention more than once, and one of her even managed to invite Max for a cup of coffee, to talk about business matters. There she confessed her feelings to him, but the man said that he had a beloved wife, and it was better for her to forget about him. The woman did not accept, and did not give up on the man. On that day, as on many others, she followed him and waited patiently for Max and his wife to leave their friend's apartment and go home. She assured him that she wouldn't do anything wrong, just chase after them. There was no concrete plan, but that day, she witnessed a terrible accident. She saw everything in front of her, the truck leaving the road and hitting the couple's car. And then, she ran to her car. Max was unconscious and his wife was behind the wheel. Anna pulled the man out of the car and dragged him to her car. She called an ambulance and ran from the scene. She just wanted to save her lover and wasted no time until the ambulance arrived. She was physically unable to get the woman out of the car. Anna thought she had done the right thing. On the way to the hospital, Max regained consciousness, and it turned out that he didn't remember anything. Anna thought it was a gift of fate and made up a story that he was her husband. That he had fallen in the basement, and she had taken him to the hospital. Everything went well so that no one looked for Max. She arranged his grave and funeral by posing as a distant relative. Max believed her, plus she was nursing him back to health, and he thought only his wife was capable of that. But when he saw his real wife, he began to remember everything. Now Max went back to Rachel, and little by little he remembered everything. The couple did not press charges against Anna because she took care of a bedridden man for a long time. And only with the arrival of Rachel, Max began to return to normal life. Anna returned her gift to fate. Love cannot be forced. So all this time the man felt nothing for her, just gratitude for the loving couple reuniting in the end. And my dear ones, what did you think of today's story? Let me know what you think in the comments, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already for more wonderful tales.